The vat cracked before the countdown finished, and I was still on my knees with a wrench in the coolant trap when 6 tons of something that wasn't supposed to exist yet stood up out of the steam. I want to say I had some kind of plan. I didn't. I had a pump that wouldn't seat right and a supervisor who told me twice that the gestation tank in Bay 4 was sealed. Inert, nothing to worry about, just fix the line and get out. So when the glass blew outward in a sheet and the restraining collar snapped like wet rope, I did the only thing a man with a wrench in his hand and 40 years of bad luck behind him does. I stayed exactly where I was, because running never once in my life got me anywhere faster than staying still and thinking did. It looked at the room first. Scaled, armored down the spine in plates the color of wet iron, low and built wrong for standing upright, built for running something down. Its head was too long for its skull, full of teeth that hadn't finished growing into their sockets yet. Whatever they'd cooked it from, predator was the only word that fit, and predator that knows it's a weapon is a different animal than one that just wants to eat. 6 technicians went for the door. The thing didn't chase them. It looked at the door, looked at the running men, and then it looked at me, kneeling there with a wrench and a coolant gauge reading red. "Don't," I said. Not loud. I wasn't talking to scare it off. I was talking to it the way you talk to a dog that's decided the vacuum cleaner is the enemy. Low, flat, no fear in it because there wasn't room for any. It came toward me instead of the door. Sirens were already going by then, the whole bay lighting red, and Colonel Drennick's voice came over the speakers ordering full containment, lethal force authorized, asset designation Thresborn 3 considered hostile. I heard boots on the catwalk above. I heard somebody charging a tranq rifle that wasn't built for something this size. None of that mattered to the thing crossing the floor toward me on claws that left gouges in concrete rated to hold a tank. It stopped a foot away and lowered its head until its jaw rested against my knee. I put my hand on it because that's what you do when something that big decides it isn't going to kill you. You don't insult it by flinching. The plates along its skull were warm, still wet from the tank, and under my palm I could feel something that might have been a purr if anything that size could be said to purr. More like a freight train deciding to idle instead of pull. "Easy," I said. "Nobody's hurting you. Just easy." That's when Drennick came through the blast door with 8 armed men and a face like he'd swallowed glass. He stopped dead at the sight of it curled against me like a dog that had found its person after a long time lost. I watched $200 million of failed weapons doctrine collapse behind his eyes in real time. Tobin. Step away from the asset. "It's not going to let me," I said, which was true, because the second I shifted my weight it made a sound low in its chest that wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at the 8 rifles pointed our way, and every one of those soldiers took an involuntary step back. "That thing has killed 2 handlers in simulation alone," Drennick said. "It does not choose. It executes the conditioning we put into it." "Looks like it's executing something," I said, "but I don't think it's yours." He didn't like that. Men like Drennick never like the moment they find out the machine they built has an opinion. He ordered the tranq team forward. 3 darts went into their hide and might as well have been spitballs. The beast didn't even raise its head, just shifted its weight half an inch so its shoulder was between the rifles and me, like I was the one who needed protecting and not the other way around. "Sir," one of the soldiers said, "it's shielding the civilian." "I can see that, Corporal," Drennick said, in the voice of a man watching his career end in real time. "Get Dr. Asher. Now." They got Dr. Asher. She was the one who'd actually built the thing's nervous system, and she came in white-faced and furious, not at the beast, at Drennick. "You ran the wake-up sequence early," she said. "I told you the imprint window needed 48 more hours under controlled supervision. You ran it early because the demonstration's in 3 days and you wanted footage." "The demonstration is still happening," Drennick said. "Look at it." Asher pointed at the Thresborn, still leaning its full weight into my side like a cat deciding I was furniture now. It imprinted. On him. Because he was the only person in this room who didn't run and didn't scream commands at it. You wanted a weapon that takes orders. You got an animal that picked its own handler, and you picked the worst possible moment to find that out. Drennick's jaw worked. Then we recondition it. You can't recondition an apex bond, Colonel. You can only kill it and start over, and even I don't know if it'd survive a second imprint. Then we start over. That's when the floor under the catwalk groaned, and I understood why the demonstration mattered so much to a man like Drennick. Because Bay 4 wasn't the only tank in this facility. Through the grating I could see 3 more vats further down the hall, smaller, earlier in their growth cycles, and every one of them had started to thrash against the glass the second their older siblings' distress call rolled through the building's bones. Whatever the Threshborn line communicated in, it wasn't English, and it wasn't subtle. "They're not finished gestating," Asher said, going pale in a new way. "They shouldn't be responsive yet." "They're responding to it," I said, nodding down at the beast against my leg, or to me. I genuinely don't know which anymore. Drennick made his decision the way men like him always do, fast, wrong, and certain. He drew his sidearm. If it won't take handling, it gets put down. That's the protocol for a failed asset, and I will not have a 6-ton liability roaming my facility because a maintenance contractor knows how to keep his voice down. I felt the beast's whole body change under my hand before I understood what I was feeling. Not a flinch. A decision. Its head came up off my knee, slow, and its eyes, slip-pupilled, the grey gold of a storm coming in, fixed on the pistol in Drennick's hand the way you'd look at an insect that had made the mistake of landing somewhere important. "Colonel," I said, "I'd put that away." "This isn't your call, Tobin." "No," I agreed. "It's his." The Threshborn didn't lunge. That's the part one want people to understand, because lunging is what an animal does, and this wasn't that anymore. It rose off its haunches in one unhurried motion, 6 tons moving like water finding the fastest way downhill, and it put itself fully between me and the gun without so much as brushing my shoulder. Precise. Deliberate. A wall that had decided where it was going to stand. Drennick's hand was not quite steady anymore. To his credit, or maybe just his survival instinct, he didn't fire. Down the corridor, the 3 younger tanks shattered, not from inside, but from the kind of vibration a sound too low for human ears makes in glass that's already under strain. 3 more shapes, smaller, still slick from amniotic gel, came scrabbling out into the hall on legs that didn't fully work yet, crying in a register that hit something old and animal in my chest. They didn't go toward the soldiers. They came toward the Threshborn. Toward me. "Oh, hell," said one of the corporals, very quietly. "They're cubs," Asher said, and her voice had gone soft with something that wasn't fear anymore. "They're not threats. They're, Colonel, stand down, for God's sake, look at them. They're frightened and they're answering the only calm voice in the building." I crouched down without thinking about it, the way you do for any scared animal half your size, and the 3 of them piled against my legs and the Threshborn's flank like they'd been doing it their whole short lives instead of the last 4 minutes. One of them, the smallest, climbed half into my lap and put its blunt armored head under my chin and went still, the way a thing goes still when it has finally found the one safe place in a building full of noise. Drennick stood there with his pistol still half raised and 8 soldiers behind him who had all, by now, quietly lowered their own weapons, because there is a point past which even trained men can't make themselves point a gun at something curled up asleep against a man's chest. "This is not," Drennick said, to no one in particular, "what the demonstration was supposed to look like." "No," Asher said. "It's better. You wanted proof of concept for a controllable bioweapon. What you've got is proof that the things you build will choose decency over rank every single time you give them the choice. I'd suggest you let the generals see that instead. It's a better headline than 4 dead handlers." I don't think Drennick had a comeback for that. I watched him try to find the version of this where he still came out the man in charge, and I watched him fail to find it, in front of his own corporals, in front of the woman who'd built the thing he'd just tried to shoot. He holstered the pistol. He didn't apologize, men like that rarely do, but he turned and walked out of Bay 4 without another order, and that was its own kind of admission. The Threshborn settled back down beside me with a sound like a held breath finally let go, and the 3 cubs rearranged themselves without waking, one against my ribs, one across my boots, one still tucked under my chin like it had never once occurred to it that I might not want it there. "You know," I said, mostly to Asher, because she was the only one left who looked like she wanted to talk instead of file a report, "I came down here for a coolant pump." "You're going to need a bigger truck home," she said. I looked down at 4 creatures built, on paper, to take a city apart on command. Threshborn and 3 cubs nobody had a name for yet, all of them breathing slow against me like the calmest thing in the world. Somewhere above us the base was no doubt already drafting the report that would try to explain how a maintenance contractor had ended up with custody of the most expensive weapons program in the sector, and I was already deciding I didn't much care what they wrote, because the beast had already decided, and nothing in that building outranked it now. "His name's not on the file yet," I said. "I think I'll call him Rust." Rust didn't open his eyes. He just leaned in half an inch closer, and somewhere down the corridor, in the dark beyond the broken vats, something large and unfinished and not yet named answered back, low, content, and entirely his.